Okay, great. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Welcome to the webinar. This evening, we are going to be talking about the housing element of Milwaukee's comprehensive plan. We have interpreters here. Interpretation is available in Hmong. As you heard for Spanish, we will be recording that and posting it later. The Hmong recording will also be posted for viewing. Again, if anyone is joining a little later and does need Spanish translation, please do let us know in the chat for this evening. This is an informational webinar where we will provide an overview of where the housing element plan is now, changes since the last draft plan, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to submit them in the question and answer feature, and then we will answer them in the end at the end of the session. I'm Tanya Fonseca, and I'm joined here by city colleagues Amy Oath and Sam Likling, who are also panelists. And Joanna and Zong Cheng are our lovely interpreters in Spanish and Hmong, so thank you to them. For this meeting's agenda, we will give a quick overview of the plan and why the city took on the project. And then we will provide a summary of the engagement that we received throughout the process and a summary of the updates that we've made to the plan, thanks to all of your feedback. We also will talk about how you can provide additional feedback on the proposed draft plan that's available online now, and then we will end with questions and answers. So let's dive in. So what is the plan? This plan is an amendment to the city-wide policy plan, and this plan sets a collective vision for housing, and it includes policies and recommendations for housing and neighborhoods in Milwaukee, including updates to the city's zoning code. And the plan will be adopted. Once the plan will be adopted, staff will work on implementation, and some of that implementation includes some zoning code updates. So I mentioned that this plan has policies and recommendations. So we'll spend a little time talking about what a policy is. A planning policy is a guiding principle or statement that informs how decisions about land can be used, and it can guide future efforts for how to improve physical, social, and economic conditions in Milwaukee. But plan policies are not regulations, so they cannot create new or change existing programs, regulations, or funding for specific priorities on their own. So for example, a policy might say, allow for accessory dwelling units in all neighborhoods. This policy would guide future zoning decisions and development approvals to allow for accessory dwelling units in more neighborhoods. This plan also makes recommendations to update the zoning code. A zoning code is both a written document, so like that example on the right, all the text, with all the rules, along with a map that shows what zone each piece of land is part of. And each zone has a unique set of rules that guide development in terms of use and the size and shapes of buildings. And these zoning rules and changes to the zoning map are laws that are adopted by the city's common council. So why are we taking on this project now? And why are we talking about policies and zoning? There are many different housing types and many different needs for all households across the Milwaukee community. And we spent a lot of time talking to all of you about what we would like to see. And during that process, we heard from the community and through the data that there is a need for a greater diversity of housing types so that we all have more choice. We also know that we have a housing shortage for people that live in Milwaukee right now. We have one of the most competitive rental markets in the country, and we have not been seeing enough housing, rehab, and development for the last couple of decades, meaning that we don't have enough supply in both rental and home ownership. And we also know we have room for more housing and more households in the city of Milwaukee. We used to have 150,000 more people in the city than we do today, which means that there were more people living here, uh, in the homes, supporting the businesses, and paying into the tax base to support city services. So we took on this project to encourage more housing choice for everyone here and those who will call Milwaukee home in the future as well. The planning process kicked off back in the summer of 2023. And at that time, we kicked off strong with a lot of helpful discussion about the visioning and goals for housing and what we collectively need moving forward. Then we came back with draft recommendations based on that outreach, looking at previous planning studies for consistency and discussed all of those recommendations with the community. Then in April 2024, we rolled out a draft plan with another round of community engagement throughout the city. And based on the feedback in spring of 2024, we updated the draft and hosted a public hearing in July. At that public hearing, we received requests from the community for additional engagement, as well as a benefit and harm analysis. So, over the fall and early winter of 2025, we conducted additional engagement. And using that engagement, we developed a benefit and harm analysis that's available online, and we made updates to the plan based on all the feedback that we received. So now we're at a point where we have a proposed draft plan that's based on all of the engagement throughout the process, including these last few months. For the engagement, we have interacted directly and indirectly throughout the process with over 10,000 people. Over 2,250 people engaged at open houses, pop-ups, community meetings, and focus groups, and over 8,600 people engaged on the website through the activities available online, as well as viewing the video recordings of the meetings like these. We have also included multilingual materials and interpretation throughout the process. So I just want to thank our interpreters here again this evening, Zong Cheng and Joanna. They've been here throughout the process, and we really appreciate their expertise and support. Throughout the engagement process, we heard a lot of really important, helpful things that informed this plan. Themes include affordability in terms of home ownership and neighborhood choice, neighborhoods and quality of life, thinking about repair and anti-displacement. We also heard a lot about quality building design, sustainability and resilience in terms of healthy environments and parks, transportation options, including walkability and safe streets, and fair, safe, and quality housing conditions and accountability, including accountability for landlords. And finally, we did hear also about growth and making sure that we have a resilient city that is a good place for all of us moving forward. We also developed a benefit and harm analysis that goes alongside the housing element. And this benefit and harm analysis analyzes the near-term zoning strategies that we talk about in the housing element and evaluates the potential benefits and the unintended consequences that are possible of proposed recommendations for future updates to the zoning code. It focuses on the concerns that have been raised by the community, by all of the community members during the public engagement process. And it also talks about the plan's alignment with the city's goals for housing, affordability, choice, anti-displacement, and ensuring that vulnerable communities aren't harmed by the plan's recommendations. It also includes steps to track data and mitigate potential unintended consequences of the plan's recommendations. So the analysis covers 5 areas: where we're starting from, where we are now, the zoning and policy recommendations of the housing element, the plan benefits, those potential harms and concerns, and then those impacts. And the engagement and the benefit and harm analysis really shaped the updates to the plan that you see today, as well as the tracking and the techniques that the city will implement to mitigate potential harm. And this is available online if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet. And with that, I'll pass things to Amy.
Hello, everyone. So with all the feedback received, including the last round engagement, they've really helped form these additional updates to the plan. So these updates are intended to make it clear how we're reflecting plans and goals and working to meet current housing needs. So here's a quick summary of the updates that we'll run through this evening. We've updated the near-term zoning strategies, and that included some restructuring of the plan overall. So as you look through the document, it might look a bit different, but also some familiar. We also included a section on 7 key priorities. There are some updates to the policies, and there are 4 policies that were added. There's also a section regarding commitments to support Milwaukee's housing system, an explanation of the name change. And we also updated the data to make sure it's up to date with more infographics and storytelling. This included expanding the explanations of the housing types and moving that earlier in the plan. So first, the updates to the zoning recommendations. These are 2 near-term zoning code update recommendations that are included in the May 1st proposed plan. The first is to update the zoning code to allow for more types of neighborhood scale housing in our neighborhoods. So this includes allowing in all neighborhoods to detach single family homes, townhomes or fee simple attached homes, accessory dwelling units, and cottage courts. And I'm going to show you in a minute how this compares to that July 2024 draft. The other near-term strategy is one that has not changed throughout the process. So this is still recommending adjusting the zoning code to remove barriers to new housing on business corridors and in multifamily zoning districts, relying on height limits, setback requirements, and design standards instead of mathematical equations to control the number of housing units. So this just applies to the multifamily districts and the commercial districts where multifamily is already allowed. This is a comparison chart that runs through the near-term strategy 1 between comparing the July 2024 draft and the updated proposed 2025 plan. So for single family detached homes, our current code allows for this in all single family and 2 family districts. So single family being the RS districts, RT being the 2 family districts. So there's no change. July plan recommended continuing to allow them, and same with 2025. Single family attached homes or townhomes, and these are currently allowed in all the RT, the 2 family districts. Recommended in the July plan was to allow them in all RS and RT districts, and this is the same in the 2025 draft. Accessory dwelling units. These are not defined in our zoning code currently. Recommendation in the July 2024 draft was to allow them in the RS and RT districts. This is the same in the 2025 draft. Cottage courts are also not defined in our current zoning code. Recommendation in 2024 was to allow these in the RS and the RT districts. Same thing with the 2025 draft. The recommendation for duplexes in the 2024 draft was to allow them in all RS and RT districts. That recommendation has been removed, so they'll continue to be allowed in RT districts as they are today. For triplexes, these are currently allowed in the RT4 district. The 2024 draft recommended allowing them in all RS and RT districts. For the 2025 draft, the recommendation has been removed. So there's no change from the current zoning code. Fourplexes are also only allowed in the RT4 district now. In the 2024 draft, recommended allowing them in all RT districts. That recommendation has been removed, so there's no change from the current zoning code. So as we noted, there are, we added these 7 key priorities to really describe the priorities of the plan. Those priorities include increased housing choice and access, repairing homes and neighborhoods, a commitment to intergovernmental collaboration and legislative advocacy, a commitment to home ownership, a commitment to anti-displacement, economic resilience, and walkable neighborhoods. So the plan includes a few policy updates. The first updated policy really reflects the changes to that near-term zoning strategy recommendation for neighborhood scale housing that I just talked about. So the policy more references changes over time, allowing for more housing variety through a variety of processes versus the previous version, which was recommending more housing types by right in the near term. There's also a new policy that talks about how zoning map change processes can be used in appropriate locations for middle housing types like duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes. There's also a call out box that talks more about the RS, the residential single family and RT districts, what they're like and their compatibility. There's also a new policy that talks about how an applicant for zoning changes should engage with impacted neighborhoods during the pre-development process. All right. And then we renamed section 2 to neighborhood repair, connections, and health. We updated the short-term rental policy. It now references adopting regulations versus monitoring and considering regulations. There is a new policy regarding the appropriateness of the creation of overlays for vulnerable communities. We also added a new policy that talks about limiting the placement of fire escapes so they're not along the street. And then in general, there were some language adjustments, just more for clarity and references, and some reorganization to help with formatting as we made some of these changes. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sam.
Thank you. Sam Leichling, again, Department of City Development. What Amy talked about, the changes that we made to the plan based on some of the feedback we've heard. And the other categories of feedback we heard were general requests that the city make sure that we are really elevating recommendations in the plan that demonstrate the strategies that we're either already carrying out or also will carry out in the future around a few different topics. And those especially included what we're doing to support homeownership and the city's goals to continue to develop and implement systems that provide homeownership opportunities for people who've previously been perhaps locked out of homeownership. Also strategies around ensuring that the city advances strategies that will support anti-displacement and that residents are able to remain in their neighborhoods and homes. And also the growing understanding that to achieve the deeply affordable housing needs of Milwaukeeans and to make sure that we're able to meet the city's goals of ensuring that every single Milwaukeean has a safe and affordable place to live, we're going to need continued legislative advocacy and intergovernmental collaboration across different levels of government to increase the amount of funding that's allocated for affordable housing and to make changes to both state laws that allow the city to do additional measures that will protect the rights of tenants that are at risk of displacement or eviction, as well as to hold landlords accountable for ensuring that people are treated fairly during the rental process and that their properties are kept up to code. We know that those are tremendous priorities of both, city government and neighbors and residents. And so we wanted to make sure that that was reflected in the plan. A lot of that had been in the earlier versions of the draft, but we wanted to elevate that, tie it all together in a more accessible package, and also, add some additional language about strategies that the city will carry out both now and in the future to advance those goals. And so there's a a number of additional pages in the plan that were added to express, to organize and express those commitments and goals. And we look forward to continuing to work not just within city government, with our partners across the housing ecosystem to implement those recommendations after the plan is adopted. We also talked about the name change, and we want to, acknowledge one of the reasons that we changed the name is we continued to hear during the engagement process that the growing MKE name suggested that the goals of the plan were more focused on growing the population versus meeting the housing needs of our existing population. And we wanted to honor that feedback we heard, both through the changes you've already heard about to the plan, but also to really acknowledge that the goal of the plan has always been to ensure that we're able to help all Milwaukeeans, both the ones who currently call Milwaukee home and people who may call Milwaukee home in the future, meet their housing needs. And so we've changed the name to the housing element of the city's comprehensive plan, which the plan had always been designed as that housing element. And we've just updated the name to reflect and honor some of that feedback, that the priority remains meeting the housing needs of today's Milwaukeeans as well as future residents. And all of these changes that we've talked about and all of the policy recommendations remain tied to the goals that we set out and talked about at the start of the planning process, and that Amy and Tanya both touched on earlier, which is advancing the city's goals for housing choice and access, economic development, walkable and connected neighborhoods, a city that is sustainable and resilient and healthy and thriving. And we want to make sure that all of those recommendations that are in the plan tie back to those goals, and also attempt to respond to the feedback we've heard throughout the planning process. And so where do we go from here? Well, the draft of the plan, the proposed draft plan, is available online. There's an executive summary. There's a summary of the changes. There's the benefit and harm analysis, if you've heard, and we're carrying out a number of webinars this week and next week that will be available. We're also having one-on-one and small group discussions with neighborhoods that have reached out with specific questions, and we're happy to continue that. So if you have additional questions, you know how to reach us at the Growing MK email address. I'm happy to have kind of continued deeper discussions with smaller groups offline or in other formats. And then in June, the plan will be presented to the City Plan Commission, where there'll be a public hearing held, and the City Plan Commission will take testimony and comments, consider the updates to the plan and any public feedback, and ultimately then make a recommendation to the Zoning and Neighborhoods and Development Committee. That's a committee of the Common Council, where there'll be another public hearing, and the Zoning and Neighborhoods Development Committee will again take public feedback and testimony and determine if any additional changes to the plan should be made before passing it along to the full Common Council to consider this for a vote for adoption. At that point, if the Common Council adopts it, the mayor will sign it, and it will then become an element of the city's comprehensive plan. And then we will work collectively with our partners throughout the city and other departments to begin to implement the recommendations. And we know that's not a short-term process. Some of these recommendations can be achieved in the short term. Others will be ones that will take, years of working through with partners to try to continue to advance these various goals. And we look forward to any continued collaboration with partners who want to be part of implementing this plan. And we're certainly always happy to have discussions about how we can collectively do that in partnership with our neighborhood partners. So with that, I think we now, that concludes the prepared comments. We want to make sure to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Amy.
I'm going to show the website as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right, can you all see the website? All right, so this is the Housing Element website. Just wanted to give a quick overview. If you scroll down here, you can go to the proposed draft and resources page. And under here, you can view the proposed plan. There's a comment form to make comments, executive summaries as well. And then if you go down here, there's several tabs of additional information. So this summary of changes to the plan, you can view it as a PDF or on here. Click link to the benefit and harm analysis, which is also a digital and PDF version, an engagement summary, a link to the interactive zoning map, and link to frequently asked questions. I did want to note that this is what the interactive zoning map looks like. So if you click on these, you can zoom into any parcel in the city, see what the current zoning is, what's currently allowed, and what the plan recommends. Also, if English is not your first language and you prefer to view the website in a different language, you can go here. A lot of the information we try to get in a digital format so that it would be accessible and other languages as well. All right, so back to the PowerPoint and time for Q&A.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions. Feel free to start adding other questions if you have them in the chat. I also just put the link in the chat if you'd like to take a look at the website. So our first question, and I may need clarification on this question by the person who asked it, is it says the following, if people causing the zoning updates to the plan have requested a harms listing, has there been any demand or offering of the harms caused by following these updates, reducing the effectiveness of the zoning code?
I think I understand that question, Tanya. I can take that.
Thanks.
This
Thanks,
is Sam. If I'm understanding this correctly, the question is asking, obviously, we've made a number of proposed updates to the plan based on some of the feedback that's been provided, and some of that is spelled out in the benefit and harm analysis. I take this question to be the person asking, might there be harms caused by some of the changes to the plan that have reduced some of the recommendations to allow for more housing? And that's a fair question, but ultimately, I think we have, throughout this process, talked about this as a balancing test. And we've been spending the last year listening to feedback from residents, from alders, our elected officials who are elected to represent their constituents and what's in the best interest of their neighborhood. And we've heard, there's certainly not been unanimity on that, and there's been differences of opinion expressed. But ultimately, in carrying out the balancing test of the city's various goals, as well as acknowledging the feedback we've heard, we did make recommendations to scale back some of those zoning change recommendations. And might that over the long term have impacts on limiting housing choice? It might, and we do acknowledge that in the benefit and harm analysis and talk about some of that balancing test. And ultimately, it will be the job of both city government and neighborhood partners over time to monitor those changes and monitor impacts and make adjustments as needed. And there's also language in the benefit and harm analysis about ways we'll monitor that. And if it turns out that in the future it's appropriate to make additional adjustments, there's ways to do that as well. But yeah, that's a great question, because we certainly have heard some disappointment from some about some of the past recommendations that were taken out. But yeah, in the end, that is a balancing test based on the feedback we've heard, and more information is certainly available about that in the analysis.
We have another question here confirming whether or not triplexes and fourplexes are not going to be allowed in the RT2 districts. Originally, in a prior draft, there was a recommendation to consider updating the zoning code to allow that. And that is correct. That has been updated. RT2 districts currently allow single-family homes, duplexes, and townhomes with a max of 2 units. And based on these recommendations, that will be similar, in addition to the accessory dwelling units and cottage courts. So very minimal changes in that regard. We also received a question about a district that has recently been proposed and adopted by some of our common council members, called RT5, which is a new district that allows housing units on one parcel of land between 5 and 8 units. So this is brand new. It will be in the code, but it is not mapped currently. And so there's a question about kind of the process involved, and any zoning code and zoning map change in the city goes through a public process, and that includes a mailing to residents around that piece of land. It goes to the City Plan Commission, where there will be a public hearing, and then the Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Common Council Committee, where there'll be another hearing before it's adopted. And generally, for any zoning code update, the property owner is recommended to do outreach to those neighbors as well before the formal process and submitting that application for a zoning change. So any new zoning change for RT5 would follow the process that is in place for all zoning map changes citywide. We also received a question from someone who is a renter and knows that the supply of housing does not, and that if the supply of housing does not increase, that rent may go up even more above inflation and there could be displacement. I see your 7 priorities do not include increasing housing supply. Why is there not a priority to increase housing supply? Sam, can you take that one?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to, and we certainly talk throughout both the planning document and the benefit harm analysis about that interplay between new housing being constructed and the research that shows that that will ultimately help constrain the pressure of housing costs across the city. And that is one of the reasons why we do recommend continued strategies to allow for additional housing to be created in a variety of styles and types, including multifamily housing in our commercial corridors and multifamily districts, as well as the neighborhood scale housing options that have been talked about throughout this webinar. And so I do think that one of the goals of the plan is to continue to create new housing to meet the very diverse needs of the city's housing needs, and that ultimately will increase the housing supply.
Thanks, Sam. We have a question about the percentage of units and houses that will be offered to households with incomes at or below 50% of the area median income. Sam, can you jump in on that one as well, please?
Thank you. That's another good question. One of the key components of the city's collective affordable housing strategic plan is to attempt to find ways to, over the next 10 years, create 32,000 units of housing that would be affordable to residents at or below that 50% of area median income, which, generally is, I think depending on household size, that $40,000 to $1,000 or less range right now. And so there's a series of strategies that the city is carrying out to deliver those new housing options. Most of those strategies require financing. And so that's why we have been utilizing a variety of financing tools to work with developers and other builders who are creating homes that are affordable at that level. We've been successful over the past few years at utilizing tax increment financing to support those styles of development. And when we have been using tax increment financing, that's generally what allows us to require that housing units be available at that level. And we want to continue to do that to carry out that strategy and allocate additional resources for it as well as with our state and federal partners. And so to answer the question, it all just depends on what funding sources are used for different developments. And we will continue to work to maximize as much resources as we possibly can to those deeply affordable housing opportunities.
Thank you. We have a comment here from someone who shares that they are ultimately concerned that the removal of triplexes and duplexes from the proposal will continue the path to change the fabric of their neighborhood. Their neighborhood already has a huge amount of duplexes and triplexes, and by continuing to make them difficult to build by right, we've only built single-family homes. This has led to a decrease in population, customers for businesses, and a decrease in housing varieties. Why was this removed from the plan? So that's a great question. There are areas of the city where duplexes and triplexes and quads are still allowed. And so we can share a link where, based on your particular neighborhood, you will see whether those are allowed or not. We had proposed that they be allowed in more areas of the city, but we heard from community members that we maybe aren't quite ready for that. There are a lot of concerns that are very valid that we just didn't want to make that jump quite yet. But a lot of our area of the city allows up to 4 units by right, and that will continue. And we'll add that link in the chat so you can take a look at that. Okay. Next question here. Let's see here. On the topic of repairing existing buildings, which was listed as a key point, what can be and what is likely to be done to expedite rehab on existing buildings and non-habitable condition, as well as making it easier for people and entities to purchase and rehabilitate said properties? Sam, are you able to take that one as it relates to
Yeah.
Raise and Revive? Thank you.
So thank you. That's a great question. One of the things we have continued to hear is, with the focus on creating new housing options, one of the best ways to create those housing options is by making sure our existing housing stock is repaired and made available, whether it's both homes that people are already living in and want to improve them, or homes that are vacant and need repair in order to be habitable. And so, the city operates a variety of programs to do that. One of the most significantly high volume one is our Homes MKE program, where we've continued to utilize city funds to work with local small developers to rehabilitate homes to be made available for owner occupants or lease to own programs. And we want to continue to carry out programs like that in partnership with development partners. You also talked about removing barriers. I know that our department is working to continue to have sales practices that make sure that we can reposition homes to get them into the hands of responsible owners when the city takes ownership of those properties, as well as pair those with resources for rehabilitation. And so those are all strategies that are referenced in the plan. Many of them do require funding, and we want to keep working to both preserve and expand the amount of funding that the city has for those types of important programs.
Thank you. The next question is in regards to zoning map changes again, and whether property owners can be required to contact neighbors before a zoning change. So the city, do notify residents and businesses within a certain number of feet of any zoning map change as part of the process automatically. Okay, our next question, for cottage courts, will these be rentals or homes for sale? Are they rented or sold as whole cottage courts or individual dwellings? That is a great question. I think in general, it can be either. That's what is so great about cottage courts, is they can be rental homes, but they can also be for home ownership, and there could be different setups for that. So certainly there's a lot of local community developers that are already kind of thinking about that in different ways of doing it, where someone could buy a home and as part of a court, or rent one potentially.
Tanya, I'm noticing
Yeah.
there's also kind of a series of questions I can try to group together because they have
Okay.
some similarities about next steps for engagement.
Thank you.
Yes, there was one from a community group referencing an email that's been circulating about a specific meeting, and yes, we will respond to that one tomorrow. But the broader question was about the overall feedback process, and yes, the date we've asked for people to submit comments was referenced earlier. I believe it was May 21st. That will help ensure that as we prepare the plan for Plan Commission, that we're able to incorporate potential feedback, but that will not be the final opportunity to comment. We will allow other opportunities for comment both at the City Plan Commission and the Zoning Neighborhoods and Development Committee level. And for the individuals who had emailed about that, we will respond tomorrow with more specifics about that. Yep. So definitely understand the questions, and we'll respond to all of them tomorrow for the people that had posed more specific ones.
Just quick clarification, the comments will close on Tuesday, May 20th. And we just put a link in the chat to the draft plan and where and how you can submit those comments, either on the website or to our email for the project, growingmke@milwaukee.gov. We have another question in regards to new housing units and whether they will be rental units or condominiums. So the answer is all types. In general, we want existing homes to be rehabbed, whether they be for rent or home ownership. We also want new homes for home ownership, but also rental too. We have a wide spectrum of needs and housing desires in terms of type that we need in the city, and we anticipate that we'll hopefully get both. We see as we're tracking development that both are being developed and more certainly.
So I also saw the question about, will there be a in-person citywide meeting prior to this being heard at the Plan Commission? Right now, we do not have one of those scheduled. So right now, the opportunities for comments are online, email, and again, if I know that a number of the group, the people who posed that question have offered other potential opportunities for engagement, and yeah, we will certainly reach back out with ways that we might be able to accommodate that.
We have a question about what developers have been involved in the development of the proposed policies. And there were a series of focus groups with a variety of developers and scale of developers. But one group in particular we really wanted to ensure that we heard from were the new and emerging developers, many of whom have participated in Marquette's Acre program, which is really exciting because we do have a growing, Milwaukeean population that is learning about development and doing development and excited on a variety of scales, small, medium, and large. And then we, of course, did a focus group with developers of all shapes and sizes as well to inform the work early on. Are there components of this plan that aim to help build neighborhood resilience to the impacts of changes in our climate? For instance, code changes or policies that would inform development and city planning in neighborhoods that experience more frequent flooding, have fewer green spaces, or experience more extreme heat. That's a really great question. I think, we think that thinking about climate resiliency is really important and is integrated into all of our plans. We also have a recently completed climate and equity plan that we can share in the chat with you. We work closely with other entities like the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District and other areas as they are updating floodplains in the city, so that we can plan for and work with community members short, medium, and long term to respond to changes in our community. We also have design recommendations in the housing element that speak to some of these topics as well. Okay, we have another question about the RT2 district and whether or not they will remain RT2. Yes, they will. We are not changing any of the names of the districts and what is proposed in the plan. We will be maintaining all of that. And so we'll drop the link again to the existing zoning and what is proposed. So folks can kind of check out, say, where they live or other properties in the city that they're interested in viewing.
I think there's a question about, I can read it, with application costs to do development projects. There's been a fee that was raised from $10,000 to $20,000. How will emerging local developers be able to compete with larger out-of-state developers that have access to capital? And how will Acre developers be supported through the plan and resources and capital to implement? So that's a good question. I think the reference in there to application fees is that the city did recently announce a new program to provide additional support for developers carrying out development projects where we would support them through tax increment financing district. Historically, we've supported development projects that were focused on affordable housing, given the needs for a broader range of housing, including workforce housing options. The mayor and the common council have been discussing the need to provide additional resources to make that gap. And there are application fees for those programs that pay for city costs and things like that. And those, yeah, that program was recently announced, and it's that's a specific program that will likely be used for larger developers. There's a variety of other programs we use that support smaller developers, and I think that was the second part of the question. Smaller developers who are taking on smaller individualized projects. Those are ones that wouldn't necessarily always would likely be funded with funding sources other than TID, where we don't necessarily have application fees. We're going to be rolling out a new grant program later this year called the Pro Housing Grant Program. That will be to utilized for people who want to build new construction homes. That will not have an application fee. And there's other kind of smaller programs that we know other partners are implementing with funding sources other than tax increment financing as well. And the fee has not been raised for developers who are pursuing affordable housing developments.
There's a question about the links being dropped, and I did change them, so the links should be going to everyone here. If for some reason that is not working, pretty much everything we've mentioned is linked to on that housing element website, that the QR code, and you'll see the link on the screen as well.
Okay, we have a question here in regards to whether or not there are specific layouts or locations identified where potential cottage court locations will be. We haven't identified specific areas by any means, but certainly there are areas of the city where, there are a series of lots or, kind of larger lots, for instance, on the northwest side, where certainly this could be a possibility. We also have a question about lead abatement and lead laterals. And so this plan, of course, we have policy language in regards to existing housing and ensuring that, our work as we do rehab ensures safe and quality housing for all. And this is consistent and supportive of all of the work by Milwaukee Water Works and other partners, including the Milwaukee Health Department and the initiatives that they have underway in this regard.
The next question is about policies and procedures that whether they cater to large scale developers the question says, have a track record of building lower grade and unkept building. Are there specific programs for large scale developments that acre grads can access? But all of them don't want to continue developing small. Yeah, so the city has over the past 8 or so years made some significant changes to how we support affordable housing developers, whether it's through tax increment financing or other projects. I think prior to about 2018, we almost never utilized tax increment financing to support affordable housing developers. We made a pretty big shift in 2018 to do that. Since then, we've supported about 20 projects, and I don't have the exact count in front of me, but I believe just over half of them were carried out by emerging developers or acre graduates. So there has been a track record of being able to deliver those resources to emerging developers. And we also, in all of our other funding programs, generally have ways to encourage partnering or priority for emerging developers, acre graduates. And that's been utilized in some of our, for example, the projects that the city's done to support development for early childhood educators, as well as other neighborhood scale housing for first generation starter homes. And so that's absolutely a goal. We have a track record of being able to tailor resources to meet developers across the spectrum, and want to obviously continue to do that even more so going forward.
We have a question about whether or not the plan has any goals for a minimum percentage of housing for low or moderate income households. Sam, can you answer that one too, please?
So we talked at length about the city's collective affordable housing strategic plan. That was a plan that was developed through a collaboration of government partners, housing stakeholders, and other partners. And that is the plan that sets a goal to create 32,000 units of deeply affordable housing over the next 10 years. And the housing element incorporates those goals and incorporates those strategies within the city's comprehensive plan.
Thank you. So our next question is, where is the transit and green eco planning in this plan? And how can the community be walkable with limited transit options, lack of trees and heat islands? And that's a great important question. I think, we and the county and other entities coordinate on matters like this, and certainly strategically we want to see that our commercial corridors and our transit corridors flourish. And certainly, we are supportive of new housing on those corridors because that can be supportive of the transit system. And that is something that we do hear from our colleagues at Milwaukee County Transit System when we ask what we in planning can do for them, to make sure that our transit system continues to be a success and grows rather than shrinks. And that's important in terms of walkability too, in terms of having neighborhoods of choice and neighborhoods with amenities where people can walk to services, walk to retail, walk to worship, walk to school. And so we are committed to, trying to continue to strengthen that and in the city. And we do have policy language in the plan as it relates to that. And it's also consistent with other city initiatives, including the Climate and Equity Plan, the Vision Zero work that's currently underway, and other transportation planning happening underway in the city too, to make the city safer for us, when we're outside of cars, when we're walking, when we're biking, when we're wheeling. So I think that's exciting, but as you know, there's a lot of work to do, but we are, collectively collaborating on that to try and continue moving forward on that. See here. We have another question about whether or not we've assessed our current programs and initiatives to see what's working and what's not and what's new, and needs to emerge. And then specifically the anti-displacement plan, and then thinking about just some of the factors there. And that is a really great, important question. I mean, we have a lot of plans and initiatives and programs at the city, and part of that work is always evaluating what's working, what's out of date, what's updated, needs to be updated, and, who we can collaborate with to make these plans happen. And so that's why we're updating this plan, because we realized that it was time. Our citywide policy plan as it related to housing and neighborhoods is out of date, and in order to serve our needs moving forward, given the housing shortages that we now have and some of the housing concerns, housing affordability concerns, anti-displacement, we need to update this. And that means that we have commitments around other things too, in terms of continuing to update our anti-displacement plan. We evaluate the indicators that we use to analyze our neighborhoods to better understand displacement and potential displacement in the city. And so we are committed to continuing to do all of those things moving forward. And, that is part of planning, is to continually kind of update and reflect and work with all of you, from the community to decide what makes sense as we move forward. I'm catching up on the.
There's a
Thank
question
you,
about
everyone, for your
yeah.
comments. This is really helpful. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, there's a question about adaptive reuse for existing vacant commercial buildings into residential. Yes, there's a few policies related to adaptive reuse. It's definitely something we want to see. We know the face of commercial and retail is changing, and so we want to make sure updates to our zoning code allow for that kind of flexibility and creativity as well. So yes, we're on the same. We support adaptive reuse.
So Amy, I see that it's 7 o'clock. It looks like we've now answered all the questions, except I know there is some outstanding questions from one particular individual, and yeah, we will respond to you directly offline to try to answer some of those by email or find a time to sit down and talk some of those through. But since we did notice this to end at 7, do you want to give people just a reminder of next steps?
Yeah, please go to the website, take a look, please share this presentation once it's out. So we'll have a recording. One of the reasons we decided to go with webinars is because we had like 150 people attend between our 2 webinars in the fall, and felt like this was a good way to get the word out because those videos will be on YouTube as well. So yes, we appreciate any help in spreading the word and encourage you to all offer feedback either by emailing us or through that form online. As Sam mentioned, there'll be a few ways to offer feedback, as we continue this process forward. So thank you all for being here tonight. All right, I'm gonna end the webinar.